Are you looking for an easy way to route audio from your Mac into live recordings, live streams, podcasts, or live calls? In this video, I'll show you how to do that with an app called Castor made by Ginger Audio. I first learned about Castor when I started looking for options that would be easier to set up and manage than my current solution, which is Rogue Amoeba's Loopback. Loopback gives a lot of control and flexibility in routing audio, but it can be a little overwhelming in situations like mine or if you're not familiar with routing audio. I have an audio interface that has something like 30 physical and virtual channels. So you end up with something that looks kind of like this, just lines everywhere connecting this and this to that, and it can be overwhelming. I basically have to set up all sorts of routings and subroutings in order to achieve mix minus and have easy control over the submixes so that I can get the right balance in my headphones. It's been a pain to set up, and I've spent far too many days setting it up and troubleshooting it. I will be creating a video about how to use Loopback to route audio for those of you who do use it, so keep an eye out for that. I'll probably make another video showing how to do this sort of thing with the Loopback type software that is included with a lot of newer audio interfaces. So, last week I tried out the new Elgato Wavelink 2 software, which is very similar to Castor, but it does require the use of one of Elgato's mics or a Stream Deck Plus. I figured I should make a video showcasing Castor for those who might want an easy to set up solution for routing their internal audio. Ginger Audio did tell me that Castor version 2 is imminent, which will have some major updates, but they didn't provide me with any additional information. I am hoping, though, that it will have better support for Sequoia because it is a bit sluggish on my system, and I've seen others complain about this too. I will say that while it is sluggish at times, once everything's set up, you don't really need to be doing a whole lot to it unless you're someone who needs to make constant adjustments to your volumes. You may notice some spinning beach balls as I go about this video, so I'm just letting you know now. A lot of this is due to being on Sequoia. So there are two flavors of Castor, the paid version and a free version called Castor Lite. The website doesn't really compare the two versions, but it does say you still get many of the same great features found in the full version of Castor, including an inbuilt sound effects soundboard, internal audio routing, high quality audio streaming and recording, and much more. Ginger Audio does offer a 7-day trial, and you can purchase the app directly from their website. If you choose not to purchase at the end of the trial, you'll continue to have access to Castor Lite. The installation process is pretty much what you'd expect. You download and run the installer, but since it does do some things under the hood, you do have to do a reboot to finish the installation. After the reboot, you're ready to go. And the first thing to know about Castor is that it has to be running at all times in order to route your audio. If you close it out, you're not going to have audio unless you go into system settings and change it back to whatever your default sound device is. Now that you've got Castor installed, you have to go into your system settings and look for the sound tab. There, you'll have to set your output device to Castor. This will output all of your audio through Castor. And you should probably also set your computer to play sound effects through Castor as well, and I'll explain why in a minute. Now that we've got everything set up on your computer, let's look at how to set up a custom mix. So here's the interface. It has two sections. The inputs are on the left and the outputs are on the right. And that's where we'll start. And one of the things that I really like about Castor is that it creates two completely different or separate mixes. You get a monitor mix and you get a stream mix. The monitor mix is what you will hear in your headphones. The stream mix is what gets sent out to your software, whether it's something like OBS for live streams, Riverside for a podcast, or just Zoom for a meeting. The reason that this is nice is, for example, you might be doing a live stream. Maybe you want the music to be quieter in your headphones than what your audience hears so that you can hear yourself a little bit better. Or maybe you're like me and you offer remote coaching sessions. The audio coming out of the DAW on my end might be at a comfortable level, but it's coming out too loud on the other end for my client, especially in relationship to my voice. I can then turn down the level for them to achieve or hear a better mix between the two. It just provides more flexibility. Looking at the left side of the output section, we've got our Castor Stream Mix 1. This is how it's going to show up in Zoom or Riverside or OBS. It might be where you choose a mic, it might be where you choose an input device, but either way, you're going to choose Stream Mix 1 as your mic or your input device. The monitor mix is on the right side of the output mixes, and as you can see, each mix has a fader and a basic meter to help you see your levels at a glance. And above the fader, you see a broken square, and you'll see that right here. And if you click on that, you'll see 3 pluses. This is where you insert your plugins, and you'll have an R button to enable and disable recording. Down at the bottom, we have an ear. Only one ear can be lit up at a time, and this tells you which mix you're currently listening to. And that's one of the things I do like about Castor. It was the same thing with Wavelink, is they make it so easy to check both mixes or choose them with a simple click. So right now I'm listening to my monitor mix. If I wanted to monitor the stream mix, I would click on this button. I'll go back to the monitor mix, and I forgot to mention, next to the plugin window, we have a little icon with meters to show the meter window. If we click that, then we get a nice loudness meter. And if I go ahead and press, okay, it's reading levels right now, or it should be. I think I opened the wrong one. Let's close that one. Okay, so usually you press start and you'll see that the meter will come to life. It starts reading your loudness, gives you your integrated loudness, your short term, your dynamic range, or your loudness range. You see your true peak, your short term max, your momentary max. Then you've got your target depending on your platform. So since we're doing dialogue, I'll just press Apple Podcast. So our target loudness would be -16, but that's almost impossible to achieve without post-production, where you can boost levels even more. So here, I'm going to be happy anywhere around -23 to -27. I have a pretty quiet voice, so it's going to be tough for me to get any higher without introducing a huge amount of noise. So I'll go ahead and stop these, close them up. So now let's move our focus over to the left side and our input sources. The first channel is going to be the sound effects bank. You get 4 banks of 5 sounds, and you can use the preloaded sounds or add your own. The input tracks also sport the same plugin window, so you can process each track the way that you want if you want to. But do keep in mind that each plugin is going to introduce some amount of latency. And underneath that window, or the plugin window, you have two faders with a link in between them. Clicking this link icon will enable or disable the linking of the two faders. Basically, when it's linked, both faders will adjust at the same time to the same level. When they're unlinked, each one can be adjusted independently. And below the faders, you have the mix icon indicating which mix the slider controls. The fader on the left is for the stream mix, and you know that because the icon corresponds to the icon above the stream mix over here. And then we've got the headphones to indicate your monitor mix. So the fader on the left is always going to be the stream mix, and the right fader is always going to be your monitor. And the icons also function as a mute button. The next default input source is going to be your desktop audio. By default, every sound from your computer is going to be routed here. Everything. Your music, apps, and notifications. Remember earlier when I said to set your sound effects to play through Castor? The reason for that is so that you have independent control over them. You generally don't want your audience to hear your notifications. To me, when I hear that on a stream, it just sounds a little unprofessional. So we need to do some routing in order to isolate those notification sounds so that we can control where they go. Because right now, they're just going to go out to your audience. So let me demo that real quick by playing a system sound. So you can hear that little boop sound that's coming through to our audience. We don't want that. So to isolate it, we need to start adding some additional input sources to pull audio away from desktop audio into its own channel. The first input source I usually add is my mic. So you can add a mic by going into the mic icon. And then you can choose your mic. If you're using a USB mic, you select it. If you're using an audio interface with an XLR mic, like I am, you choose the channel that the mic's plugged into. Okay, so now we've got our mic added. And you'll notice that when we add the mic, it mutes the monitor mix. The reason for that is that if you have that unmuted, you're going to hear your voice echoed back to you or doubled with a little bit of a delay. So that's going to be distracting as you talk. And that's why if you're using a USB mic, you want your headphones plugged into the mic. That way you can hear yourself without that delay or that latency. But let's start adding some applications. So the first thing, let's add some music. And I'll switch over to the stream mix so that I can hear what you are hearing. So now we can see that we've got music coming out of iTunes or Apple Music. It's no longer coming out of desktop audio. So I want to disconnect the link because the music's going to get loud here. And I still want to make sure that I'm being heard pretty clearly over the music. And that might still be a little bit too loud. I'll probably just drop it down to about -20 or so to ensure that we've got a good mix. So I'll stop that. And we'd continue doing the same thing. Let's add Chrome. Let's add Safari. Let's say we've got a QuickTime video we might want to play during our stream. So what we've done here is the same thing as what we did with music. Each source that we add or each application, that will then get removed from desktop audio. So by doing that, we can turn down the volume on desktop audio for a stream mix, or we can mute it by clicking on the icon. This way, we still hear our notification sounds in our headphones or on our computer speakers, but our audience doesn't hear it. And just to demonstrate that again, I'll play the boop sound one more time. And oddly enough, I'm not hearing it, probably because somehow I got my volume turned down. Okay, so now I'm hearing it, but you are not. And you can watch on the meters over here, you'll see when I play the sound. As I'm editing this, I realized I missed one crucial element, and that's how to set up a mix minus with Castor. If you're unfamiliar with mix minus, it's a way of routing audio so that, let's say you're on a Zoom call or you're recording on Riverside, you can hear everything and send audio to them, but they're not hearing echoing because you're sending themselves back to them. So let's use the example of Riverside, where you're going to be recording in Google Chrome. The way we would solve this is we would simply just mute Google Chrome because we want it coming in on our monitor mix, but we don't want to send what's coming in from Chrome or Riverside in this instance back to themselves, because as they talk, it's going to get sent right back to them. That's going to end with either echoing or feedback. Either way, we don't want that. So the easiest way to set up mix minus is simply mute the tracks you don't want being sent back to your guest or your audience. Let's look at one other example. And I don't have Zoom open, so give me just a second to start that. Basically the same thing. Imagine you're on a Zoom call. You want to send music out to whoever's on the other side with you. You'd have your music on, but you don't want to send themselves back to their device. That's going to cause that feedback loop we were talking about. So if you're on Zoom, you're going to mute Zoom on the stream mix. I think the easiest way to think about it is whatever input source people are coming in on, you want to mute that so it doesn't get sent back out to them. If, for instance, you're on Riverside and you wanted to play a clip from a web browser, you'd want to use something like Safari or Firefox so you aren't sending that back to them. So you'd use a separate browser to be able to play, say, a YouTube video so that your audience can hear it, but you're not feeding the Riverside session back into itself. Hopefully that makes sense. Mix minus is something that's a little difficult to try to explain, but once you understand it, it's not that difficult, especially with something like Castor. If you're going to remember anything, it's just mute the channel that your guest or whoever's talking to you is on. And now we'll get back to the video. One other thing I forgot to go over is if you are using an audio interface and you want to add inputs from your interface, let's say you have a keyboard or a drum machine or a guitar set up, you can add all of your different channels this way. And the other thing that Castor offers is the ability to record. So we can go into the settings cog and choose our or select our settings. So we've got WAV, AIF, core audio supported file, I'm not sure what that is, FLAC, MP3, OGG Vorbis, and WAVE. With WAVE, we don't have any control over quality, but we can choose our bit depth. So 8, 16, 24, or 32. And we have the choice of recording after plugins, before plugins, or both before and after. That gives you some flexibility, and then you can choose your record folder. So once you've done that, you just hit record. It will record your mix of everything, and I'm going to guess it records the stream mix. It wouldn't make sense to record your monitor mix, but that way you could do a podcast recording on your desktop. You can use this as a way to record a backup of whatever you're recording. So if you're using Riverside and you want a backup, you could set this up. You'd have Chrome, you'd have your mic, hit record, and you're going to record both of those sources into one track. I'm back with a couple other editor's notes. I looked into recording, and the way Castor works is it will record each track that's record enabled individually. So if we go back into our plugin window, we've got the enable and disable recording. By default, every track is enabled for recording. So if we were to record right now, I would get a recording for each of these tracks. So that gives us a lot of flexibility when it comes to mixing. And we also get our stream mix and our monitor mix. So we get each individual track as well as each mix. So that gives you a lot of flexibility when it comes to recording content and being able to mix everything the way that you want. One other thing I realized I didn't go into is the Direct to. What this button does is any input source that has Direct to turned on, it will show up in your streaming software. It will show up in your system preferences as an input device. So there might be some use cases. I think probably the most likely would be in live streaming where you might want to set Apple Music to its own channel within, say, OBS. So you can control it individually within OBS. But other than that, I can't really see a lot of reasons why we would use Direct to, but it's there as an option to give a little more flexibility. So that's about all there is to it when it comes to routing your audio using Castor. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy, especially when compared to something like Rogue Amoeba's Loopback. It reminds me a lot of Elgato's Wavelink and how easy it is, and you've got the two mixes set up that they make easy for you to be able to monitor so you can hear how things are going to sound to your audience while having a separate mix that you hear for yourself. I hope this was helpful, and do let me know if you have any questions about this or that when it comes to routing your audio using Castor, and I'll try to answer it the best I can. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.